Whoa, whoa! Well, you know what? I've been trying to trailblaze my journey of higher fiber, and for the past around a month, it's been good. A lot of this, and I've been realizing that Sunny here, that'd be a killer Pokemon supporter card. 2 scoops? That sounds pretty good to me. 2 scoops, and then you probably get like 50 cents off of Raisin Bran. They're going to do some joint deal. 50 cents off at Raisin Bran at the store. Get one Pokemon card. It's Solrock or Solgaleo in the box. Sounds like a good deal for Kellogg's and Nintendo. And I definitely have been talking to my friends and family about the importance of fiber. I don't think it's talked about enough in the United States. And it's on the, nutrition facts block. It's been on there for a long time. And, it really is one of those things. Now that I've been upping my fiber count, I've been looking back saying, wow, I really just have most of my life not been reaching that. Well, thanks to my mom for hiding beans in my mac and cheese as a little kid. So that stuff definitely helps. And you know what? I will say, retroactively looking back, I ate a lot of Chipotle, not just in college, but going to tournaments. I think a big thing was that, this was before our recent fast food kind of inflation, economic inflation, and in general. And it was $7.50 for a bowl, and you could get half sofritas, half chicken, a little bit of spice there. You can get both beans if you want, which I ended up doing all the time actually, and so it's like I definitely got a lot of fiber with stuff like that too. Would eat Raisin Bran occasionally. Regardless, now that I'm actively seeking it, I've always I liked that. That's actually one of my favorite Robot Chicken skits, was with Suddy, and he's just like 2 scoops, yeah. And so, killer marketing. Here I am thinking, let's make a Pokemon supporter card. Grab 2 super scoop ups and go crazy. I recently talked about as a kid when I would reflect upon the card Reckless Greed, and I learned so much about that Yu-Gi-Oh card because you could draw 2 cards from one trap, but you can't draw for the next 2 turns. And, a trap card you can't play until your opponent's turn in regular circumstances. And so that already there was a trade-off. And the standard at the time was like Jar of Greed, draw 1 as a trap, which was pretty good in like Exodia decks. But, here's draw 2. And, this was after quite some time where Konami was realizing that Pot of Greed was a bit over-dominant. But what's cool is now in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, Genesis is a format where every card that's not a Pendulum or Link is legal, but there's a point system. Pot of Greed has a decent amount of points, but that's cool that it's back, and it kind of reminds me of Pokemon A-Spec cards that just kind of jump consistency. Regardless, back then they were starting to realize, okay, 3 in a deck, that's pretty over-dominant. So Reckless Greed was all about, draw 2 on a trap, not a spell, and then you miss out on your next 2 draw phases. Now, my good friend Ryan Green showed that you could stack Reckless Greeds, and they would all funnel into just the 2 draw phases you missed, and that's it. They didn't stack there. That's cool. That's a good way to compensate weaknesses. But what's interesting is that also taught me a lesson of the cost of abundance and the cost of wealth. And you would think, if you live rich, you live lavishly, your problems are gone. But as you look more on how creative people are often pushed when there's limitations, Nintendo Entertainment System composer, someone having to build a 60-card deck in Pokemon, no more, no less, you start to see really innovative things with those limitations. They're not given abundance. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually a good example here. The standard tends to be around 40 cards. You can actually go up to 60 in a tournament. And I think as a little kid, you're often thinking, I could go to 60. And that's just more cards. But as people realize that if you run a 60 card deck, you're not drawing into the cards you might want all the time, like statistically. And so that already is kind of its own lesson about sometimes more, isn't better. That being said, Yu-Gi-Oh's current state has so many cards that searches for other cards that even I run 60 cards almost every week. And that's more about pushing almost like a new standard limit. It's not the standard. Not every deck's running 60, but you're seeing a lot more plus 40 cards in decks. And so that abundance is now being used kind of with the system of creativity. Kind of like, oh, if you do this, you get that, but you'll get this. These card routes and all these statistics, and you gotta I'm making sure I'm doing algebra but also shuffling my deck when I have free time in class. Yeah, there's my audition. There you go for the new Yu-Gi-Oh anime. Yeah, we're gonna do the introduction just like that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Here's my dance moves. And so I think the cost of abundance, the cost of wealth, you look at a game like Street Fighter, and I actually love seeing all those memes about the final boss when you unlock him, and it tends to be a purposefully kind of nerfed overall version. And I actually want to know more games that have that trope. But I always think of Street Fighter 4 as the poster of that trope, because you have Seth, he's definitely my favorite villain in Street Fighter. And Seth has this, his moveset is all about being a big sample platter of different movesets, right? A sample platter fighter. Necrid, who I main in Soul Calibur 2, is also kind of a sample platter fighter. And it's fun, they get multiple moves from different characters, but then they have kind of things distinct to them as well. And it's a lot of fun to kind of utilize this, something that you can't with other characters, this rare combination of things. And so I guess I wouldn't call it a sample. I mean, you could call it the sample platter. That's the funny part. I say sample platter, but I wouldn't say that because it's not like a demo. They're just flat out taking the move, sometimes just repurposing it. So these are characters that they take multiple moves. They're like an amalgamation moveset character. But you can't even just say amalgamation because they have their own spin on it. So really, in this case, you just be literal with what they are. It's, they take a bunch of moves from other characters and give their own spin on it. Okay? And Seth is a big example of that. He's got Guile's Sonic Boom. Technically could be Charlie's because of one-handed, which also adds to the lore of Abel seeing Charlie. And, a lot of cool implications there. There's Spinning Piledriver from Zangief, but he also adds Yoga Teleport from Dalsum when he does that. There's, he's got Dalsum's Standing Heavy Punch as well. He's got Chun-Li's Lightning Kicks. A lot of cool things, right? A lot of things from different characters. But what's interesting is you have this abundance, and Capcom was like, oh yeah, we like this as a boss, but we're going to make him playable. Well, when you make him playable, even with his own spin on things, it's that's an abundance, right? That he is rich in special moves. So they reduce his health. In fact, he was known to have the lowest health in the game throughout Street Fighter 4's lifespan in general. By the final count iteration, Ultra Street Fighter 4, he had 800 health. Ryu and Ken have 1,000. That's kind of the standard. And so to have 800 health means that you get hit by Zangief's Spinning Piledriver that does 250 damage. That's a big chunk. It's a big chunk out of any character's health bar, but a lot more to Seth than it is on T-Hawk, who also has a 1,100 HP stat along with Zangief. So that kind of way showed me since a young age that there can be some form of cost in abundance. And this is Capcom just, I would say artificially, but it's their game, the game is fictional. But in game design, yeah, they are purposely implementing a cost for abundance here. And in this case, it's really fun to watch how you compensate accordingly. Also, I should say, like, Seth's Sonic Boom, you know, it doesn't have as many recovery frames as Guile's. His spinning Piledriver doesn't do as much damage as Zangief's. Now, his input on Sonic Boom is a down-forward motion. For Guile, you have to wait a bit longer on average. You have to hold back and then do forward punch. So he definitely has these trade-offs already. Regardless, his utility is off the walls, and he gets a wall bounce. Yeah, yeah. He gets. They say it's from Chun-Li, and I could see that. Multiple characters have wall jumps, but the fact, you know, with him utilizing that with combos like her step kicks in the air, I definitely could be seeing that from Chun-Li. That's just adding more to all these different attributes that Seth has, but he's got the lowest health in the game. So what do we see? How do we see this in other games? How do we see this in life? I think at times there are people that they'll be wealthy, and whether it could be money or they could win a contest and win a bunch of baked beans. I think in their wealth, they might start getting accustomed to it. They might start getting sick of that lifestyle. Might start doing something pretty off the walls to beat the mundane day-to-day life of, oh, baked beans for dinner again, right? I won the contest. Or people that win lottery cases, they have, you know, it often cannot end up well. And so there really is a cost to wealth. And it's not to black mark wealth. No, it's more about, well, that full circle of, with great power comes great responsibility. I think a lot of people brush that off because it's been drilled into our heads for decades in media. But it's honestly one of the most powerful quotes out there, not just for its range and how many things it covers, but its simplicity. I think for how simple it is why people might brush it off and how often it's used. Some people might roll their eyes at it, like, oh, here we go, great power, great responsibility, okay, yeah, another Spider-Man show and comic. It's like, well, but that's important. That, you know, a big part of Spider-Man's character is he was given on crazy superpowers, but he's got the heart to make sure that he protects other people that weren't given those powers. He's got a wealth of superpowers, but he understands the importance of utilizing that wealth well. It reminds me of people that they make a lot of money, whether it's an actor or they run a business, and what they do is they kind of display powers of integrity where, you know, I've heard stories about people helping out with medical bills of others and they don't want any attention from that. Or people that help out fellow employees that might have got a fatal illness, and so they go out of their way to make sure their employee is okay, understanding that as a priority and that their business will probably be all right and they want them back and thriving. And again, they're not publicizing this, but that's kind of the catch-22, is because they're famous, usually someone else catches on and then it makes the news, and then I hear it and I can share that as a story, as an example of, here you go, you have wealth, but you're, you know, in this case, you're using that pretty well to help others. There's a push and shove. There's a push and shove of, you know, on the opposite end, there are people that are bitter towards people that are always wealthy. There's like this default, if you become a wealthy person, I'm going to be angry and jealous at you. But all of our lives are different. We all have different stories. It's important to understand the context of how they might have made that type of wealth. And it's important not to make an ignorant label on that. And also, again, some of those wealthy people, they might be doing things behind the scenes to help others. It's tough. It's a tough world out there to make just a quick judgment, right? And make a quick line of saying, oh, okay, if they're this, then they're that. And so I think the cost of wealth, yeah, it also comes with probably some associations like that. So what do you do? What do you do with that position, right? Going back to the Street Fighter example, as Seth, you have all these options. That's great, but how are you going to utilize that? You know, Seth he basically is a, you know, he's not a jack of all trades, he's like a glass queen of all trades. You know, the whole jack of all trades, master of none. He's not king level because of things like, again, some of his moves not doing as much damage as the original, or not having like the same amount of frame data for like recovery. But I'd say he's a queen of all trades just because all that put together, which, you know, Seth's big theme is like a tangent, like a tangent engine yin and yang. So all that put together, making a new balance of the character, can create something pretty incredible. A lot of fun stuff you can watch with Seth being played, utilizing what you're given, but understanding the limitations that are at hand. And so I think there's a great combination of being humble, understanding limitations, how to work with those limitations as a creative person. And then if you start thriving from that, staying humble, staying true to those foundations you created. And that being said, someone like Seth, he's a pretty interesting guy. Obviously he's evil. So he actually did get humbled quite a few times as the main bad guy of Street Fighter 4. And he actually has a little bit of a philosophical depth to him, but that kind of he definitely is that type of character where I think it lines up with his play style, and I would like to see him come back more. He came back in Street Fighter 5. I think what works for a play style like that, because some people will write off a character with movesets from other characters is lazy. But I think Seth is really creative. I think Necrid's really creative. Necrid doesn't really have low health. In his case, they took a bunch of moves from other characters, but they repurposed it with his own signature weapon that can morph into other weapons. And he doesn't, in this case, he has about the same amount of moves as every other Soul Calibur 2 character, while in Seth's case, special moves, he has easily some of the most in the game. And so, that's his kind of trade-off, is because he has that, he has lower health. Necrid's more of a special case where the moves, Soul Calibur's like special move instances, it's more of like their moves. It's not just saying flat out, this is a normal, this is a special move. There are special inputs. But yeah, Necrid's more of a case of just taking entire different movesets and making Necrid have a combination of that. Regardless, Necrid has a similar thing. I main him in Soul Calibur 2 because I thought he looked cool and his sound effects were cool. And in his case, it's, he has, axe moves from Astaroth. He has, this awesome kick move from Voldo. And it's like, how do you use that together? Because Astaroth and Voldo were designed with their separate movesets. Necrid, has a bunch of these things put together. I don't think he had as much developer time as the other characters, but he was a nice addition. And so it's kind of this fun challenge of Astaroth is known to be a heavy hitter. Voldo is known to be off the walls, kind of crazy. And so how can you combine those things in different matchups? And so that's kind of its own creative test. And so that abundance of different moves, how can I creatively utilize this and not waste the potential here? Pokemon is another example here of, some people talk about 4 move slot syndrome, and I've talked about it before. I don't think that exists, but I do think there is an interesting situation with a Pokemon like Dragonite or a Pokemon like Nidoking or Nidoqueen, where in terms of attacking moves, they have a pretty wide range of different types. There are Pokemon out there that when they do damage, they tend to do damage with quite a few types. You can do grass, poison, ground, dragon, dark, and maybe a few more, not counting things like hidden power and the Terra mechanic, where you can go into any type. So on average, you might have a Pokemon that, let's say competitively, is known to have 7 to 8, on average in terms of what they could be using at the time for just kind of what they're known for. Every now and then, though, you could see Dig on Ninjask, which is cool. That's a ground move. That's actually, Ninjask doesn't learn a move like Earthquake, doesn't learn high horsepower, but it learns Dig. And you can use that creatively with things like Toxic. You can use a Z Crystal to boost its attack. Regardless, now you're hitting Steel and Fire types super effectively. So, with that being said, Nidoking, Nidoqueen, and Dragonite, since Gen 1, they've been known to do Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Fire Blast. They're already covering the Tri-Attack poster elements here. And Nidoking can use Earth Power, Sludge Wave, Super Power. Nidoqueen's on the same boat there. Dragonite let alone let's talk about, Outrage and Fly with a Z Crystal if you want to, with Toxic. So, there's all these elemental moves that they can do. That's kind of a big part of their strengths. And so what's funny is that their wide typing coverage here can be seen as its own form of a cost for being rich in abundance here. What's the cost? Well, where do you want to commit? And I wouldn't say it's like a detrimental cost, but this time it's a cost of how can the pilot be creative here. You only get 4 moves per Pokemon. So with Nidoking, okay, well, right now Heatran's used a lot, Fire Steel type. I'm gonna run Earth Power. Okay, Corviknight's used a lot. That's immune to Earth Power. Okay, I'll run Thunderbolt. I got 2 moves left. Okay, there's a lot of Dragon types out there like Garchomp and Dragonite that are 4 times weak to Ice. I'll run Ice Beam. Okay, 1 move left. Well, Sludge Wave's a pretty good move. When you're the same type, you get a bonus there of 1.5 times damage. Okay, Sludge Wave, there's my move set. Oh, there's a Blissey, right? There's a Chansey. There's a Snorlax, right? I can run into that in competitive. Normal types are only weak to 1 type, which is fighting. And Snorlax, Blissey, Chansey, they're all known to have really high special defense and pretty high HP. And so they can actually just hard wall Nidoking in a lot of situations. If you run Superpower, a physical fighting move, you can oftentimes undermine a lot of cases where they might throw that out. Now, there's all these different, combinations you can do with your Pokemon, their Pokemon. Regardless, being creative and understanding application, staying educated, staying on your toes is important when you have abundance, and in this case, an abundance of moves. So in Nidoking's case, an abundance of knowledge of what he can utilize, and so what from these combinations of knowledge and experience can you use to succeed? And so it's also often that case of don't become complacent. Whether you become abundant or it's just every day. I think understanding to not be complacent, to always learn, to always grow, to always strive for improvement, regardless of where you are in life, I think that's the backbone of success. Success even when you feel like you've made it. Nidoking can go around saying, oh, I've made it, look at all these Pokemon I can hit super effectively. But when push comes to shove and it's time to fight, I hope that Nidoking was analyzing tactics and analyzing what the battlefield actually looks like. Or else a Blissey could keep doing Seismic Toss versus him and healing the teammates that Nidoking's trying to take down. There's all these different situations, and it's important to stay humble, reflect upon yourself, and keep at it each day. I love Mondays.